acknowledge the Deputy Lord Mayor, Susan Riley. Always great to have Susan here. Daniel Layton, the Chairman of the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation, Jay Bonington, John Edwards and Jane Peck, who are board members of our foundation. Our wonderful CEO, Catherine Brown, in whom I have the most profound admiration for the work that she does with our foundation. Members of our grants advisory committees, those hard-working people who have to make those hard choices. The Lady Mayoresses committee members, it's also wonderful to have them here, and we celebrate your connection with the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation. Our donors, our members of charitable and community funds, our giving circles, our Swanson Society, the Youth in Philanthropy participants who are here today, and more of those during this speech, and our grants partners as well. And in particular, congratulations to the Seed Challenge grants partners for the announcements that Daniel has just made. Always tough choices, but great to be able to make those announcements. And I agree with Daniel. It was wonderful giving out the Lord Mayor's Awards, and I have nothing to do with them, I promise you. I just stand back and let really good committees decide who should get these awards. And to see so many of those recipients who have also partnered with the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation was wonderful. By the way, Daniel, when you named me as the #1 ticket holder, I thought he was about to say for the Great Geelong Football Club, which is also true, but I thought it might have been just a little out of context here. Could I also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we gather today, the members of the Great Kulin Nation, and pay my deep personal respects to their elders past and present, and thank their elders. And we sit here right between the lands of the Wurundjeri and just over the other side of the Yarra, of the Birrarung Ma, the Boomerang people. So I pay my respects to them, because I always like to remind people that we're a very young city. We're only 180 years old this year. And yet we should be very proud that our First Peoples are the oldest continuous culture in the world and celebrate that as well. I've just come back from Manila, from APEC, where I was asked to speak on the future of the city. The day after me, there was some bloke called President Obama, followed by President Xi. But I'm pretty sure most of those participants were there to hear about the future of the city. Please allow me that small allusion to continue, if you wouldn't mind. But you know, as Daniel was speaking, the person who struck me, and in between the panels and the speakers, they had a number of quite inspirational people who told their story. Bankaroy, who told the story of Barefoot College in India, and a range of others. But one person that struck me was Jack Ma. And you may know the story of Jack Ma. 15 years ago, his company didn't exist. This year, he will turn over $500 billion. His company is Alibaba. And it actually doesn't make a product, it connects people. It connects people. And what he said to me struck me when I thought about the work that we all do, because I think he gave the greatest tip to entrepreneurs I've ever heard. He actually said what he does during his day is he wanders around and he looks at things that are difficult but should be easy. And then he works out ways of making that happen. And if you think about, young people with a disability finding work, that is something difficult, but it should be easy. Young people who are homeless on our streets, difficult, but there should be ways of making that easy. And so I would argue that it doesn't just apply to the world of for-profit entrepreneurship, but also to the area in which many of us work, social entrepreneurship. And I've just left out as my board member my great friend Richard Balderston, who's hiding over there, and so I'll now embarrass him by naming him specifically, and it gives me great pleasure to do so too. And when I was talking about the future of the city, there were so many resonances with what I'm going to say today. Everyone there understands that Melbourne is the world's most livable city for 5 years in a row, and that we're a very affluent city, and we are. But I talked over there a bit about our culture of giving. And one of the points I made was, if you want to be a great city of the future, then you are going to have a culture of giving. And I think that's a very important thing in creating a coherent, a peaceful, a cohesive community. And, we are so far away that many other cities, although they've heard of us, don't really know of our character. And so I tell them two stories. The first thing I say to them is, you might not know, but we are a city that comes from 200 different nations. We speak 240 different languages and dialects. We practice 120 different faiths. And yet we are one Melbourne. One Melbourne. And often when there is trouble in country of origin, it is not, well, I would say all of the time, it is not transplanted to here in our city. I remember watching the Australia Day Parade last year. If you haven't been to an Australia Day Parade, please come to one. They are just hilarious. Cultural groups, all sorts of people who just form groups, the things that interest them. And I'm watching the national groups move past, and there was the Czech Republic, and right behind them was Slovenia. And I thought that didn't go awfully well last time, as I recall, but there they were, perfectly happy in Melbourne, marching together. And that's what you will find in our city. And I think we're also a very generous city, and that philanthropy does matter to us. I think we've been built and we've been shaped by extraordinary people and organisations, inspired public spirits. In many cases, they were great visionaries for the future of this city. And I know we were the world's most wealthy city back there in the 1880s and 1890s. But when you look at the great public institutions that our forefathers built, whether it was the University of Melbourne or the State Library or Town Hall or Parliament itself, in quite a small colony a long way away from the rest of the world, the confidence and optimism they had about their future, that is us, I think was boundless, and something that helped shape what our city is. I'm always very careful on St Patrick's Day, and I've been given the honour of speaking on St Patrick's Day a couple of times, about speaking of my admiration for jurist Redmond Barry. And you would understand in an Irish audience that will divide people equally in half. You're either for him or against him, and if you're against him, then you really are. But for someone to found the University of Melbourne and the State Library is remarkable. But his other institutions, the Mechanics Institute, the Philosophical Institute, the Philharmonic Society, the Royal Society, the Art Gallery, he had a hand in all of those. I always think of him, and I never say this on St Patrick's Day, he was the great civilising influence on our city. And he set down a future for us that said, these are the institutions of the people to be used by the people to make this city what it is. And he also had a remarkable career, not just in philanthropy, but you may also recall in the law. I think he was one of the great philanthropists and visionaries to leave their mark on our city. At the foundation, we always think of Eldon Foote. A remarkable story for those of you who don't know it, one of Australia's largest bequests, a staggering amount of money, well over $100 million to be left to the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation. And his gift, I think, transformed our foundation and it turned it into the powerhouse that it is today. And his gift enables us to have an enormous impact on the health and the well-being of communities, not just across Melbourne, but across our nation. There are not many Eldon Footes who come along, but when they do, you should celebrate them. The Ian Potter Foundation, on a completely different issue, I'm speaking to them later on today, which has invested now more than $207 million into the arts, medical research, the environment, education, and community well-being. Many of you know Betty Amsden, well known for her community participation in the arts, and in 2009, a very generous bequest of over $5 million to the Arts Centre in Melbourne. Many of you know my friend John Wiley and his wife Miriam, who equally have given a very large bequest of the same order to the University of Melbourne in the area of literature. And these are people who've been successful in business, but for them it's not simply a matter of continuing to make money or enjoying the money that they have made. It is about how can we use that money in order to create a better Melbourne. I should take a deep breath when I say Dame Elizabeth Murdoch, because her influence is everywhere. I was delighted to make her the very first free woman of the city of Melbourne, the highest honour that we can bestow that's an honorary of the city. In case you're wondering, I mean, the keys of the city, of course, give you free entry and egress from the city. I had to look up what being a free woman enabled you to do. It actually enables you to bear arms in the city of Melbourne, but I don't think Dame Elizabeth took up that particular right. But should she have needed to, she would have been able to do it, I assure you. But there is a life well spent, wasn't it? A life well spent. Perhaps our most beloved citizen, I would have thought. And her support for children's charities, community health organisations and hospitals, the arts, the botanic gardens, all of those things came from a generosity of spirit that's part of those those sort of people and families. I think of the Meyer family, such a rich part of our city's history. And many of you know the stories of the Sydney Meyer lunch for people who were vulnerable and homeless at that time. A quite unprecedented step for a major business figure to take. I could go on. The difficulty with these lists is if you don't keep going, you leave somebody out. So I'm going to confess that I'm going to leave people out and stop there. But they're legends, and there are many others as well. And I think we're not terribly good, even as a sector, at celebrating those legends. And we should be. We should be. You know, we celebrate our sporting legends. We celebrate our legends in the world of art, in all sorts of other fields of endeavour. But our philanthropic contributors, large and small, not just the large ones, the small ones. And many of you remember the parable that tells of the woman who gave a very small amount of money. But to her, that was an enormous part of her total amount of money. And therefore, she was celebrated as someone who had given many hundreds of times more in quantum. So the small ones as well as the large ones, they've helped to transform our city, I think, into one of the great cities. I have a soft spot because I didn't know the history of Sir John Swanson when I came to Town Hall. Former Lord Mayor, founder of this foundation, a successful businessman. His goal was to provide Melbourne's hospitals and charities with an assured stream of income. Haven't things changed since then? No hospitals need that now, do they? No, sorry, I won't get onto that. Being the chairman of the Royal Melbourne, I won't get onto that. But it was a time when returning servicemen and women from the Great War were in need of healthcare, and Swanson stepped up. The fund he created was based on an innovative and a community model, you know, one that is common now, but not then. And it was one of the largest of its kind in the world at that time. And during the 1920s, the foundation expanded its reach. It introduced workplace giving and initiatives like our own Flower Day. And I think Catherine is going to speak a bit about Flower Day a little further on. And over the years, many other people have stepped up for the foundation. Eldon and Anne Foote, Ron and Lurleen Slaney, Arthur Martin, just to name a few. I'm very proud of the scope and the reach of the work we do at the foundation. 100 million plus in grants to tens of thousands of charities over the year. And since 2007, the foundation has led philanthropic investment in affordable housing and in homelessness. Over $3 million in grants over the past 3 years. And what that does is make a real difference in the lives of people. A real difference. I see that every day. I mean, I get complaints every day, and I try to deflect them as complaints and remind people that no matter how vulnerable and homeless, these are people who are members of our community, and that therefore we owe a duty to them. I remember when I was first elected Lord Mayor, and that was 2008, and it was late November. But in fact, it was one of those November nights that we can get in Melbourne, a bit colder, lightly drizzling with rain. The count is sort of endless, and it finishes about midnight, and I'd been elected Lord Mayor in what I can only look back on now as a remarkable stroke of luck. But nevertheless, I'd been elected. And so my team and I, at midnight, went down Swanson Street to have a drink to kind of celebrate my election. And as I'm standing there waiting for the other members of the team to arrive, I looked across the street in Swanson Street, and there were two young people there who would have been, I guess, from across the street, maybe 15, maybe 17 years old. And not even in a recessed alcove, in just the doorway of a shop, they were putting down cardboard boxes to prepare to sleep rough for the night. I remember thinking to myself then, Rob, this is why you're Lord Mayor. It's not to cut ribbons, it's not to go to dinners, it's so you can actually do something about young people like that who are sleeping rough on our streets. So that's why I'm so proud of the foundation. And to Catherine, to you and your team, on behalf of everyone here, thank you for your commitment and hard work to Melbourne. And I look around and I see many friends in the audience who are doing that work as well. And I wanted to celebrate you as well. But one of the things that I think that I would like you to think about at the end of when I speak, and I promise you it won't be for much longer, I'd like you to help change perceptions about philanthropy, about who can get involved, and about new ways of giving. That it's not just for the ultra-successful and super rich at the end of their careers. I want you to make philanthropy more democratic. And that's a challenge, I think, for all of us. So at the foundation, Catherine and Daniel have pioneered collective giving, like-minded people coming together to pool their resources to do the right thing. In some cases with quite small amounts of money individually, but coming together through things like the giving circles, Impact 100 Melbourne, the Melbourne Women's Fund, the Swinburne Philanthropy Alumni. Those organisations work to punch far above their weight and far above the weight that they could bring individually. So you don't have to be a multimillionaire to be a philanthropist. You don't have to be immensely wealthy to make a difference. If we actually band together, and by the way, the reason that that's so successful in Melbourne is because that's what we're like. We are a partnership town. As I look around here to so many of you, the reasons that your organisations and your careers work is because you can partner with others. In this city, you can pick up the phone and ask for help, and I have found it is unstintingly given. That is a great power to build upon, that power of partnership. And I would also say again to Catherine and Daniel and the team, start with young people. So our Youth in Philanthropy program, and Dr. Peter Hollingworth is not with us, and that's because he is not well, and I want to pass on his apologies. I can assure you he must be quite ill if he's not here. I say to young people, don't be a mouse-click activist, okay? So there's some online petition, and you can go to it, and you can click, and your opposition or your support is registered, end of story. That is not the way you get involved in changing communities. You've got to start to think about the things you can do to make a difference. We began the Youth in Philanthropy program with 4 schools. I think today they're at 23. Each school is allocated $15,000, and they have to go out and distribute to eligible charities. And they learn about the difficulty of making those choices. And they learn about the breadth of offer that is out there. And they learn about the beauty of contribution. And they also learn about the foundation. We have mentors who guide them through that process, assessment of funding applications. You know, not something that's easy for people who come to it for the first time. Interviewing grant partners, again, not something that is easy. Every story they hear is a worthy story, and yet they have to make hard choices, and they do make those funding recommendations. I remember talking a couple of years ago, and I'm very proud, I hope the photo is still on the wall at the foundation, Catherine. I was with a number of young women from an Islamic school, and they were telling me how for them, coming from, you would have to say, quite a cloistered existence, this had been life-changing for them to look at what else happens in the community where people aren't quite so supported by family and culture and religion. It's in our community is in its 3rd year. And it invites not-for-profit organisations and schools to partner together on projects. Again, that idea of partnership, trying to take the classroom into the real world. So St Mark's Catholic Parish Primary School in Fawkner and the local St Vincent de Paul work together to re-establish the school's vegetable garden. So they grow, harvest and donate vegetables to St Mark's Hope Cafe, provides free meals to local people who are homeless, they're socially isolated, there might be an emergency accommodation. They built a seed-raising greenhouse, an irrigation system, a worm farm and composting bins. Now, that is a worthy philanthropic venture, but I want you to think of the benefit that those young people derived also from that experience. At a time when we worry about young people becoming more isolated, and when they are more isolated, perhaps even or attracted to being radicalised, then programs like Youth in Philanthropy and in our community can provide glue because it gives them something to belong to, something that's important. I think more engaged young people means an enormous benefit for a future city. Let me now announce the annual Flower Day grant. The Rose Day and Wattle Day appeals were well known across Melbourne for many years, and with the support of Flowers Victoria, the Foundation relaunched our Flower Day appeal 3 years ago. The appeal aims to tackle one tough issue facing Melbourne and provides an opportunity for donors to work with us. This year, the Flower Day appeal will focus on preventing family violence, a leading cause of homelessness. And this year's grant is to the Domestic Violence Resources Centre Victoria and will support the promotion and use of the Smart Safe app. which is a new tool to help people experience family violence, collecting evidence to support intervention orders. Might sound a little prosaic, but if you think of the importance of the gathering of that data, it allows them to report breaches and save information in the cloud, not on their phone. And you understand the importance of that. I hope that people feel comfortable using the app. I hope that it will support victims' access to the justice system. And the thing I liked about it is practical help for people who need it most. And Catherine will talk more about Flower Day shortly. In conclusion, let me say why I admire what you do so much. There are three sectors in our community. There's the government sector. If you think about what we do in the government sector, we're really protective. You know, when I was a member of Parliament, I used to bring young school kids in and I'd say to them, what do you think we do in here? Mostly they'd say, you argue. I'd say, yes, we do that. Yes, we do that. You argue a lot. Yes, sometimes we do, yes. And in the end, what I'd say to them is, we make the law. We make the law. These books sitting in front of you, here, this thing called the Crimes Act, that comes out of here. And so government has a kind of a protective role. If you think about business, its job is to generate jobs and wealth, stimulate the economy. I don't underestimate that. Without that, we can't do any of the other things that we want to do. But when I think about the philanthropic and the not-for-profit sector, what do they do? To me, you are the transformative sector. I can't think of a major social movement, whether it's the women's movement or marriage equality or rights for people with disabilities, that has not started in the not-for-profit and philanthropic sector. That is where transformation begins. Certainly it is then taken up by government and taken up by the for-profit sector. But more often than not, these large movements begin in the area in which you work. So that's why I want to thank you for helping to shape our city, binding our community together, empowering our people. That's why I encourage you to get involved, whether it's supporting the Flower Day appeal, starting your own charitable fund with the foundation, or taking part in donor conversations or a giving cycle. Ask yourself, and that to me is the importance of a future city, what can I do to make a difference for our city? And when you do that and we work together, we really will have the most livable city in the world. Thank you for being here today.